Hey guys, I am Lana. This is from Corporate to Crystals. We're back for another video. This is going to be video number 2 in the mini series about my experiences with religion so far. And in this video, we're going to talk about my trauma, my religious trauma. And I want to be very clear as I talk about this. I believe that everyone has their own versions of religious trauma. Even, some people are non-believers and they're just not interested in at all. That's its own form of trauma because we're all connected to God's source energy. So that is that disconnect is a form of trauma, like something caused it. Then there's people like me who are non-believers, but we're seeking. And there's trauma that I'll talk through my experience with it. And then there's people who are religious and there's all sorts of trauma that they experience within their own religion. Or when they're kind of like trying to venture outside of their religion that they were built a foundation within, if that makes sense. And I won't be able to speak to that because that was not my experience, but I've heard from a variety of people enough of their stories to know that that is 100% something that a lot of you have experienced. And so the religious trauma, everyone experiences their own version of it, but it's a very real thing in our collective. And so it's a form of separation. Non-believers versus believers, right? That's separation. This religion is better than this religion. All of it is a form of separation. And so that separation is, again, a trauma, a wound, because we're all one. And all of us can have our own journeys, our own paths, our own flavors, and our own experiences that create our path in order for us to accomplish our mission. And so in the last video, I was talking about how my path was quite neutral. I was open-minded and seeking and excited to learn. And the experience I was having were demonstrating to me that the feeling that I was trying to cultivate by seeking for a religion, I was not finding it. And so I was resistant to religion and kind of put it off to the side. So I want to talk about some of those traumas, some of my religious trauma. So in the last video, I talked about my friend who was, I loved him, and he was gay, and his Jehovah's Witness family. I never had a family who was like anchored to a religion, so I didn't understand why it was such a big deal. And so that was a pretty traumatic experience that kind of like kick-started this for me. Additionally, I have parents who are divorced, and they got divorced when I was like 4 years old or something like that. And, I can't speak for everyone else, but I know for me, like when you have parents that get divorced that young, like I don't really remember them together. So there's definitely trauma there, and there's definitely some stuff I had to work through in my older years, but so did my friends who had their parents married, you know what I mean? So it's like the trauma I experienced from having divorced parents is I had people who were religious, and the moment they would find out my parents were divorced, I can read energy, and they're literally judging me. They don't know me. They don't know my parents. They don't know the story. They have no idea why that decision was made. But already just from hearing that my parents were divorced, they're looking at me in a negative light and like making me feel like my childhood, which I had no control over. I had no control over my parents' marriage and what they did and didn't do. I was like 4 years old when it was like ending, right? But I have these individuals who are judging me and judging my family for those choices. And so I automatically felt as a little girl, I'm like, my family's bad, So I had trauma on me about that. And then later in college years and whatnot, I had a bunch of friends and a bunch of, when you have divorced parents, you really are interested in learning about married parents because you don't have married parents, And especially me, I'm just like very curious about human nature in general. So I loved learning about everyone else's family. And so my friends, they would tell me stories about their families, and there were so many like unique families that they all were in. But I saw a pattern where a lot of individuals whose parents were still married, the kid would almost immediately say, I wish that they weren't, though. And then when we would like talk to them further about it, they would express to us that the only reason their parents are still married is because their religion doesn't believe in divorce. Like they won't get a divorce because of their religion. And I was pretty ignorant because I had only learned like surface level about some of these religions. So I was like, whoa, that must be why people are judging my parents for getting a divorce. And I didn't really like think about that until I had other people telling me that their parents won't get a divorce because of religions. So I didn't know that. I just had divorced parents, like I'm just a kid. And so the kids would talk about how traumatizing their household has been, and the terrible communication and the, weaponizing of children and things like that just created really toxic home environments that they literally wished that their parents would get a divorce. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, I honestly, like, my situation may not have been perfect, but, my parents, I think they co-parented in a decent way. I lived with my mom, and my dad, I saw him all the time, like he came to almost every softball practice that I had or softball game that I had. Like my dad was very present, although he wasn't in the home. He was very much around. He was an active father. And we would spend weekends with, kind of varying weekends with them. And again, it wasn't perfect. We had our ups and downs. They had their issues, but at the same time, I remember feeling like every time we came back to one of the parents, they felt refreshed. They seemed like they had had a break. And they were excited to see us when we returned. That's how I experienced it as a kid. And I was like, oh, they're excited to see me, And now I can understand. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get it. So to me, I didn't understand what was so terrible about having divorced parents, but I was projected onto a lot and judged a lot for something I couldn't even control. And then I always was very protective of my parents because I'm like, I don't know the details, the ins and outs. At that age, I didn't know kind of like what happened, but at the same time, they made that decision. Like, I don't understand why people have opinions and they're judging it. Like, just let people live their lives. So I saw that duality as well, as like people judging me for my parents' choice to divorce, and then people whose parents were married wishing their parents would get a divorce. And I always was like, okay, it just seems like we got some relationship problems as a collective, So I paid very close attention. I always was very curious about relationships because I was just noticing like it didn't seem like they were going so hot out there, Okay, yeah. And then cursing. So my family has cussed, whatever you want to say. And this is something that they didn't let us do in our youth. I remember like we had rules, but I'm not someone who likes rules. So I'm very rebellious, and my parents struggled with it for a bit, but I was just kind of like, I'm not calling people names. It's just kind of like the way I express myself sometimes. And people really, really judge for cursing. And I want to be very open because this could be something that when I have kids, I'm going to have to, if God tells me to get rid of cursing, like if God shows me that that's something that I need to rid myself of from an ego perspective, I'm down. But at least for now, I find it fun. Like it's just an expression of my energy that like, I don't know. It doesn't bother me. And like, I like being real. And sometimes that's just the way I want to express myself. I don't know. So, but I definitely have felt rejected, but also projected onto from others that like when I cuss or when I curse, I'm a bad person because of it. And I'm like, okay, like whatever. Like, everything doesn't have to be so stuffy all the time. Like if I want to say like a bad word, then like let's do it, you know? And I feel like I was definitely one of the kids who, when I got to the age where I remember my parents being like, don't speak like that, don't speak like that. And then it got to an age where I'm like, I'm a grown up. You pay none of my bills. Like literally, I'm in college. I pay all of my own bills. I'm going to do exactly what I want to do all the time. You have no control over me. So I'm going to say whatever I want to say. I'm not saying it at you. I'm just saying shit because I want to say shit, you know? And so my parents had to start like surrendering to the fact that like that's something that's like the way I wanted to speak. And maybe there's trauma there. Like maybe it's from society. Maybe it's from music. I don't know. All I know is I don't think it's that big of a deal. So unless God tells me otherwise down the road for like when I have kids, it doesn't bug me at all. And so, yeah, a lot of people seem to judge me for that as well. Okay, virginity. I'm gonna keep this short and sweet, but I've heard from so many of my friends their stories about when they lost their virginity. And there's so many traumatic stories. There's so many stories that are just like not positive experiences. But there's very few of them who are abstinent till marriage. I'll tell you that much. Okay. And maybe that's just the culture that I lived in. I don't know. Like maybe I'm in the wrong area for like where all the abstinent till marriage people are or something. I'm open to that because I know, you know, I get it. If you're a non-believer, you probably have more of a tendency to not have those strong values, right? So I'm open to that. That being said, of a lot of my friends, I had like one of the most beautiful experiences. I had like a long-term boyfriend that we 100% were like in a committed, loving relationship with each other. And we waited a long time and it was like a beautiful experience. So I still, even with all that, was judged for not being abstinent till marriage. And I'm like, thank God I wasn't. Like, I'm freaking in my 30s now. I would have been waiting a long time, you know? To me, it always felt like that's something that I was like quite modest about for the most part. And I always wanted to pick partners that felt safe for me. But at the same time, like, I wasn't, if it felt right, it felt right. I don't know. I don't want to like put rules on it and stuff. I just wanted to like flow through my life and experience life and not have so many rules. And it's like already hard enough and stuffy enough. So it's like I was almost always in committed relationships. So it's like, if that's what we decide to do within this relationship out of like love, then okay, that's what we chose to do. If that makes us a bad person, then I guess it makes me a bad person. I own it. But I don't think that makes me a bad person. I think that was part of my path. And if that's not what other people's paths look like, I honor that and I respect that. And I think there's elements of celibacy that I've experienced through my whole life. So it's not like, you know, like I was celibate for big chunks of my life. But, you know, I also still am not married. So I'm absolutely grateful I wasn't abstinent until marriage. I gotta be honest. Okay. I had people judging me for my virginity and like when I lost it and stuff. And I was just like, okay, whatever. Okay. Then I was in a long-term relationship. And we were like committed and I was in love with him. And the next step felt like we should move in together, you know? I loved his family. They loved me. We were like, it felt like we were on a really good trajectory. So we were kind of like living across town from each other. So it was like, let's move in together and like give it a go. And I'm glad we did. There was definitely some bumps in the road for that. But I remember getting judged by a lot of my Christian friends and also they were gossiping behind my back. So it's like they wouldn't even say it to my face. Like if you would tell me to my face and give me like feedback. Let me like be better. If I'm doing something wrong, tell me, But no, they just wanted to gossip behind my back and tell me how, I'm moving in with my boyfriend before marriage and how that's bad. And I'm like, really? Because it sounds logical. Like to me, we're in love. We're in a long-term relationship. We're committed. And like we want to see how compatible we are under the same roof. We've never lived together. It's going to change the dynamic. Let's give it a go. So that felt like common sense. It felt like the next step. And I'm not someone who wanted to rush into marriage because I had watched my parents go through a variety of relationships, right? Because they were divorced. So I was very aware of how changing partners and changing homes and like changing up dynamics and relationships can like really impact the relationship and also like the kids. So I like going slow. It just felt right. I don't know. But I had people judging me for moving in with my boyfriend too. I was just like, all right, I can't win with anybody. So then I had a bunch of friends with a bunch of different types of religion, and I remember being open, and I remember taking people's advice about my own life. And I remember being like, okay, these people seem like they're sweet, they have good heads on their shoulders, like I'm gonna like listen to them and take their advice. And not all of them, but almost all of them, it was like it didn't work for me. And I had this perception that because they had like religious values or something, like their advice might be better than mine because of the projection that people put on me about like I'm bad for all of these reasons. And so I remember like giving it a shot and trying to like listen to and take advice from some of my friends who were religious. And I just remember being like, intuitively, I'm like, this is not me. It's like if I take these people advice, I'm going to create their life. And like, no disrespect, I don't even want their life. Like, it seems great for them, but that's not me. And so, I gave it a shot. I took some people's advice multiple occasions. And I just remember being like, this is so not me. Like, I'm just not that person, and that's okay. But I just had to kind of like own it. And I couldn't take advice from anyone anymore, not just religious people, but like in general. Because I just felt like they were projecting their own lives onto me. And I'm like a very unique person. Like I remember looking at a lot of my friends and family members and stuff, and I don't think that any of them knew what I was doing in my own life. But I just remember being like, I'm so happy for all of them that they're celebrating these milestones, and they're like accomplishing these things and whatever. And I loved watching them go through these moments, but I didn't want the lives that they were all creating. I was doing my own thing. I was doing it my way, But I caught wind that people like thought that I was just like this lonely single person or something. Because it's almost like anyone who had a single friend, they'd be like, Lana, I have this single friend. Do you want to meet him? And I'm like, maybe, like, tell me about him or show me his picture or whatever. And if I wasn't interested, they were like very confused. It's like, you're single, he's single, like what's the problem? And I'm like, the problem is a lot of different things. Like how much time do you have? I can get into it, Compatibility is a very complicated thing. But like I could tell that people almost like pitied me for being single or like choosing to be single. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Like, so their advice was stemming from a place a lot of the time of like just getting into a relationship because from their perspective, they felt like not like being single was weird or something. And I was like, let it be weird then. I don't care. I've been in enough relationships to like stop doing it until I find like the right one, It just seemed like a no-brainer. And then the last one I have on here for religious trauma that I experienced was astrology. I had no idea that astrology was like considered in the occult or that people thought it was demonic or whatever. I literally did not know that. So like that was something I learned over the last couple of years on this journey. I had no clue that by me talking about astrology or like saying that I'm a Taurus or sharing it on my social media or whatever, I literally had no clue that people would be looking at me with judgment to be like, that person's demonic. That is not how I learned about astrology. That is not, like, to me, astrology wasn't linked to religion or spirituality at all. It was just like this isolated thing that I was really interested in. But I now understand that it like kind of went into this occult umbrella where a bunch of stuff is like compiled together and like hidden, and people think it's like demonic and dark and all this stuff. And I was just like, I was shocked when I found out that it, like, people viewed it as demonic. And so that's like another complication on my path, is like I'm open to, if it, hold on, Bubba, if God wants to take it away from me at any time or encourage, like, as a part of my path, it's going to go. I'm open-minded to that, but that has not happened so far. We keep getting some adjustments for it and like deepening our knowledge and like opening our mind to expanding within astrology. But as of this moment, it does not feel like I'm supposed to let go of astrology, and it definitely does not feel demonic at all. And that's something that I had people projecting onto me a lot, and it's like religious trauma, that when people project their opinions and their truths onto you, then you have to deal with it. And like one of the biggest things that I have struggled with through all these different traumas is this feeling of like not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, not feeling like feeling insecure and feeling shame just for being myself. Like I can't control that my parents got divorced. You know, like that's not fair that I'm getting judged for that. And if it feels right for me to make some of the decisions I'm making in my life and I'm not hurting other people, that's my decision. Like, why is it anyone's business? And why do people feel as though that's something to judge or shame in another person? That is their own religious trauma, because their own beliefs have told them that anyone who doesn't operate within a certain set of rules means that those individuals are bad. That's not what I believe. That is not what I believe. What I believe is you follow your own heart, your own path, and God is within all of us. And as you navigate that, you just do the best you know to do, you know? And that's what I was doing. I was doing the best I knew to do. And I just felt like a lot of people have religious trauma on both sides. As a non-believer who was seeking, the amount of projections that I got just by being myself and like existing on my path, it pushed me away from religion. It made me feel like I was being judged. I wasn't good enough. If I went to this church, I was going to be shamed. If I chose a church, I was going to be shamed. If I participated in these activities, like someone was going to tell me I'm not good enough. I would have to be battling with people just to like seek God, you know, because my life choices make me a bad person or something. But that's not how I see it at all. And I think I'm actually like a good person who is not perfect, but like a good person whose path was designed in a very specific way, you know, to trigger people, first of all, but also to stay neutral, to learn a little bit about a lot of stuff and stay neutral. And I love that. I'm curious. I love learning. And I love the fact that like I'm now at a place on my journey where I'm guided to read the Bible. And I'm excited to learn about all of the different religions again from a higher consciousness level to decode it. This is something that excites me. And so for some people who view me as not having enough experience to walk this path, or shaming me for being fake because, you know, I was a non-believer and now I'm a believer, we should be celebrating that, right? I was seeking my whole life and I found. That's a win. If you're truly a light worker, operating out of the light, bringing people to the light, that is a win. To convert a seeker and a non-believer into the light of whatever kind to connect them to God, I'm pretty sure that's like what we're supposed to be doing as light workers. So anyone who is in separation consciousness thinking their religion is better than this one, they're better than non-believers. Non-believers thinking, you know, myself included, thinking that people who are religious are just like judgmental and like all they do is project onto me how bad of a person I am. It creates separation between our collective. So we have to work through it. And so my path is perfectly designed for me to help bridge that gap, to help non-believers who might be seeking find the light in a way that perhaps they have resistance to due to their own religious trauma. And then it also works to our people who have religious trauma and they're trying to explore other teachings other than maybe what they learned through their family. Good. You've got options. You can find the light through basically any way you want. Follow your heart. And just know that if it doesn't require a church or a book or any of that, because I didn't have any of that to ascend to the level I'm at. So you literally don't need it. If it empowers you and you want it, then go get it. If that is something you're called to participate in, then heck yeah, do it. But understand there's light and dark within all things. There's duality within every spiritual community, every religion, every person, all of it. So just discern for yourself, follow your own heart, and you'll get exactly where God and you designed your path to be, from my perspective. Okay, that's religious trauma. I'll see you on the next video. Okay, bye.